Hello, geometry students. Welcome back for our final section of Chapter 10. So all through Chapter 10, we've been talking about different things: radii, diameters, chords, tangents, looking at both angles and segment lengths. Section 10.8 is kind of a different situation. It's equations of circles. So we're going to be able to take an equation and figure out where is the center of that circle, what's the radius, how could we draw it on a coordinate plane. So just like we have a standard form equation for a line, ax plus by equals c, or we've got a standard form for vertex in standard form for parabolas, we've got a standard form for the equation of a circle. So I want to point out that the equation for a circle with the center at h and k, so h and k are going to be a part of our equation, and it tells us the radius r. So here's our formula. It's complicated. It's got squares all over it. So you've got x minus h squared plus a y minus k squared equals r squared. Well, r is the radius. So notice on this little coordinate plane example over here, I've got a center right here. That's an ordered pair, right? Maybe it's over 2 and up 2 or something like that. I've got a radius, the length of the radius. We have to remember to square root. So if I had an example, something like x minus 2 squared plus y plus 4 squared equals 36, we can figure out the center, hk, and we can figure out the radius. So the h and k are inside the parentheses. The h, or the x coordinate of the center, is inside the parenthesis with the x. Please notice the signs inside the standard equation. So right here are my h and k. Since the formula itself already has a minus, my x-coordinate of my center is going to be positive 2. Because I already have a negative, I leave that negative behind. My y-coordinate is going to be negative 4, because that would have to be minus a negative, because I have to leave the negative behind. The radius then, this is radius squared. So if the radius squared is equal to 36, I have to remember to square root, so I know that my radius is 6. So a couple of quick things. I just have a couple of like red flag warnings over here. So the first thing, watch your signs for h and k. Don't be in a big hurry and grab the wrong sign with the right number. My second warning is to find the radius, don't forget to square root. So let's do a quick run through. So write an equation for each circle, then graph it. So for number 1, I've got a center at 0, 2, and the radius is equal to 4. So remember, our formula is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So we're just going to plug in values to h, k, and r, right? That's all we've got. So in example 1, our center is at 0, 2. So I'm going to put in a 0 for h, I'm going to put a 2 in for y, or for k, and then I'm going to use that radius. Well, if I've got x minus 0 squared, y minus 2, watch the signs for your h and k, equals 4 squared. I am not going to write x minus 0 squared. I'm just going to know that that's an x squared. No parenthesis on that part of the problem, but the y minus 2 still has a squared, equals 16. There's my final answer. If I wanted to graph that, it'd be super easy. Just make myself a little coordinate plane. I'd put a point at over 0, up 2. And then to get my radius on there, I'm going to go 4 units up, down, left, and right. Slanted, remember, that's why we have to use Pythag or other things, distance formula. So I'm just going to go 4 down, 4 up, 4 left, and 4 right. if, and then we see how your circle drawing skills are, hopefully you can draw a halfway decent circle, maybe better than mine. Number 2, it says the center. So just used a C this time instead of the word center. So we know that 3, -3 is our H and K. This, just be careful, if the diameter is 12, our formula says we do r squared for the other side of the equation. So don't forget that your radius is equal to 6. Don't use the 12. So just watch out for that. What about if I gave you a circle and I said, write the equation? Well, I could count, or I see that I've got 3, 2 as my center. So 3, 2 is H and K. The radius is equal to, now some situations I might, like say if I didn't have it pre-graphed, I might have to do the distance formula. This one, I'm going to jot it down really quick in case you forgot it. D is equal to a giant square root, subtract the x's squared, plus subtract the y squared, and then square root at the very end. But in this particular case, I can count up, down, left, and right. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So my radius is equal to 4. Remember, you can only count up, down, left, or right. You cannot do anything slanted or diagonal, horizontal, and vertical. So my radius is 4. So I can easily plug my numbers in there. X minus 3 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 16, which is my r squared. Again, if I was not given the radius or the picture where I could easily count it, or if it was a weird number, then I would need to do distance formula. All right, so let's pick out the HK and radius. Let's do example number 5 here. So remember, the equation is x minus h squared, y minus k squared equals r squared. So in this particular case, the center is at h and k. So this is interesting, right? So my h, am I going to have a positive 3 or a negative 3? Positive 3, right? Because I have to leave the negative behind. The y, there's nothing with it, just like that very first, or one of those very first examples. It would be like y minus 0 squared. So I just don't write that. This right here is my r squared. So if r squared is equal to 36, the radius is 6. If I'm going to graph this, I'm going to go over 3 and up 0. And then I'm going to count 6 in the horizontal and vertical directions. And that one should be a little lower. I'm going to do my best to connect these in a nice, neat circle. Some days are better than others. All right. So that's just, excuse me, that's just using that equation when it's already given or putting values into the equation. What if I ask you to write the equation of a circle? I tell you the center and I tell you a point. So like that example that we had graphed where we could go ahead and count instead, but I don't have it counted and we can't really draw it because we can't make that perfect circle. So you are going to find the distance between those 2 points because the distance between those 2 points will be your radius. If you figure out the radius and you're given the center, then everything's done for you, right? Then you just plug in your HK and your R. So let me jot down again what the distance formula is. Giant square root, subtract the x's squared, plus subtract the y's squared. Remember, if you have a diagram, some kind of coordinate plane given, You can count horizontal or vertical. If you're not given a diagram, you can't just go ahead and draw it because a circle's not easy to draw. You have to use the distance formula. So this takes us down to here. All right, so let's do a quick run through of this. So find the equation of a circle with a center. So automatically I know this is h and k. That part's done. It passes through -6, 7. I don't know the radius, right? So I have to find that. No diagram given, so I'm going to need to do the distance formula. So I'm going to call this x and y 1 and 1, x and y 2 and 2. Remember, it doesn't matter which one's which as long as you're consistent. So the distance is equal to, subtract the x's, so -2 minus -6. You could do it the other way as well. 4 minus 7. I actually am doing x1 minus x2, right? As long as you're consistent, it doesn't matter which way you do that. So I end up with a -2 plus 6 is 4 squared. 4 minus 7 is -3 squared. Everybody remembers when you square a number, you always get a positive number. So this is the square root of 16 plus 9, which ends up being a square root of 25, which we know is 5. So my radius is 5. So then I can just easily go ahead and write my equation. So I'm going to plug everything in. So x minus h, quantity squared. Well, we just set up here that h was -2, so it's going to be x plus 2 squared. Y minus k. So let's see, what's that going to be? Y minus 4, right? Right here's my k. Whoops, here's my k. Equals 5 squared, which is going to be 25. Don't forget to square your radius when you put that into your equation. Also notice right here, this number ends up being what goes into that. So if you had something weird when you did the distance formula, like the square root of 80, the distance equals, you're going to end up squaring that to put into the formula, and you're just going to put an 80 into your formula. So be careful on those. We could draw this as well if we wanted to. All right, so that's the easy part. Let's talk about completing the square. So if you're going to write an equation of a circle and you have something like this mess, x squared minus 6x plus y squared plus 4y equals 3. We have to complete the square. You may have done this in algebra. What we do is we divide this into 2 sections, actually 3 sections. So I'm going to take the equal sign and just leave the equal sign, what's on that side. Any plain numbers, any constants go to the right-hand side. And then I'm going to split apart my x's and y's. So this is the x section, this is the y section, this is the constant section. We're going to do this procedure over here 2 times. So it says to find 1/2 of b. Remember how our standard form is x squared, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So I'm going to use this b right here, the number that's in front of the x. It says to find 1/2 of b. So 1/2 of my b value, well, this guy, -6, is my b value. So 1/2 of -6 is -3. And then it says to square that result, so -3 squared is plus 9. So I'm going to add 9 to that. And it says add that to step 2, which is right here. But if I add 9 on one side of the equation, what do I have to do on the other side of the equation? I have to add 9, right? You have to keep your equations balanced. So we're going to do 1/2 of b squared. I'm going to scooch that down right there. Oops, not going to scooch that down. I just wanted to move the square. There we go. So I'm going to do the same thing with the y's. So y squared plus 4y, I'm ignoring everything else. This is my b value right here. So if b is 4, 1/2 of b is 2. squared is 4, so I'm going to add 4. And if I add 4 on one side of the equation, I have to add 4 on the other side of the equation. I can add a bunch of stuff. That's no big deal. All right, so here's then the next step that's not in this part. What we are going to do is we are going to set up, I should make this a step 4 right here. We're going to set up and we're going to do x plus our half of b value squared for one part. Let me move this out of the way. And we're going to do y plus our half of b squared. And then we're going to do the math on the other side. So over here, I'm going to put a set of parentheses in this section. A set of parentheses in this section and equal sign. What we're technically doing is we're factoring two problems at once. So I'm going to factor this x squared minus 6x plus 9, only I'm going to do this the easy way because I set it up so that I can just jump right to a set of parentheses squared. So it's x with my half of b. Well, half of b was -3. I keep the sign. I go to my y section. I take my y with my half of b. Well, y, half of b was +2, so +2, keep the sign. And then I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do this math problem. 3 plus 9 plus 4 gets me like 16, I think. I now have myself a standard form of an equation for a circle. So now I can identify my h and k. So my center is at my h and k values. And my radius is going to be the square root. So my center is going to be at +3, -2. My radius, remember this is radius squared, so my radius is going to be 4. I now could go ahead and very easily graph this guy, put a point at 3, -2, and then count 4 units horizontally and vertically all directions. So that's completing the square. Maybe you've done this in Algebra 1. If not, we got this. So I feel like this was the problem that we just did. So let me skip over to this one. So I've got in problem number 8, an x squared plus y squared plus 8x minus 14y plus 40 equals 0. I want to make an x section, a y section, and a constant section. So I'm just going to group these two guys together, x squared plus 8x. I'm going to group these two guys together, plus y squared minus 14y. And then I'm going to get that constant to the other side by subtracting 40 from both sides. I'm going to divide this up into my parts. So remember, it's half of b, and then I'm going to square it. I'm going to reuse that half of b when I go to parentheses. So my b value for the x's is 4. So half of 4, or sorry, is 8. I was already doing my half. My b value is 8. Half of 8 is 4. Square it and add that 16 to both sides. My y, my b value is -14. Half of that is -7. If I square that, that's plus 49. Notice we always add because when you square a number, it always ends up being positive. And don't forget to add it to the other side. So now I'm going to put parentheses for each section and do the math on the right-hand side. So let's see. I go inside my parentheses, I put x and my half of b. Well, half of b was a +4. For the y's, I'm going to put y and my half of b, so y minus 7. And over here, I'm going to do a math problem, -40 plus 16 plus 49. I think that's going to be 25. Somebody double check me, make sure I did my math right. Some days are better than others. All right, so that's what we need to do to get it from this messy where there's x's, not just x's in parentheses squared. I got to put the parentheses into the problem by completing the square. So now I can identify my h and k. So my center, my h and k, remember, are inside my parentheses. So this time my center is going to be at -4 and +7. My radius, remember this is radius squared, so square root that is going to be equal to 5. I'm going to put a point at -4, +7. I'm going to count 5 in all directions. If your graph falls off your graph paper, make it work. It'll be fine. And then I'm going to sketch that circle as best I can. So that is all about the standard equation of a circle. Remember to watch your signs for your H and K's and have some fun completing the square. I picked all of my B's so they were even numbers, but we could deal with decimals, right? It's not a big deal. If this was x squared plus 5x, my half of B would be 2.5, and then I would square that. So it's okay to do that. It's all right to have decimals or fractions. That's it for 10.8. Thanks for sticking in there. Thanks for hanging out for the whole chapter. I hope that everything is falling into place and you've got this figured out. Come into class with any questions, and I'll see you next chapter.